Today we are going to talk about food chains and food web. Plants and animals get their food in different ways. As plants is able to make their own food, they are also known as food producer. For animals, they have to move around and hunt for other animals to survive. So they are also known as food consumer. Animals, unlike plants, they are unable to make their own food. They either consume plants or other animals to get the energy for them to stay alive and move around. This energy is necessary for them to carry out respiration, for them to carry out life processes. Consumers rely on green plants directly or indirectly for food. Take for instance, as you can see from these two photographs, the giraffe actually feed on the plants. Okay, depends on the plants directly for food, as they are plant eaters. As for the crocodile, they are they are carnivore, so they mainly feed on other animals, okay, for food. But the animals that they feed on may be a plant eater, which feeds on plants. So in this way, they depends on green plants indirectly for food. So there are three main groups of consumers, okay, herbivore, carnivore, and omnivore. Herbivores are plant eaters. They feed only on plants. Okay, so examples will include the elephants, cow, and the horse. Of course, there are other examples like rabbits, sheep. For carnivores, they feed on animals only. So examples of carnivores will include tiger, lion, shark, toad, and snake. Omnivores are also known as plant and animal eaters. They feed on both plants and animals. So examples will include a rat, pig, duck, man, and chicken. For food consumers, they can be further classified into either prey or predators. Okay, in this instance, prey are animals that are eaten up by the predators, and predators are animals that feeds on the prey. Okay, take for instance a very simple example. Okay, so in this case, say the grass, okay, is eaten up by the grasshopper, which is in turn eaten up by the bird. So in this case, the grasshopper is the prey to the bird, and the bird is the predator of the grasshopper. Okay. So we'll move on to the next part. Certain species of plants are carnivores. That means they feed on insects to stay alive. Okay, examples will include the Venus flytrap, sundew, and the pitcher plant. Okay, for the pitcher plant that is shown over here, as you can see, they have deep cup leaves that resemble the pitchers. Their nectar actually helps to attract the insects, and once the insects wander inside, it will be trapped, as the inner walls of the pitchers are smooth and slippery for them to escape. So normally at the bottom of the pitcher, you will find a pool of water that is deep enough to drown the insect. Okay, for the Venus flytrap, on the leaves, you can find hairs, okay, lying on the leaves. When the insect make contact with the hair, it can trigger the leaves to snap shut. Okay, for the sundew, the leaves are covered with tendrils. Um, it's covered with sweet liquid that helps to attract the insects. When the insects come close to the tendril, this fluid is sticky enough, okay, to is sticky enough. Hence, the insect, when it lands on the tendril, it makes it hard for them to escape. And after that, the leaves will roll over and suffocate the insect. Okay, there are three types of food consumer. Okay, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. Okay, we'll take a look at another example. In this case, hey, so we have the grass. We start with the grass, then eaten up by the grasshopper, then the praying mantis, and followed by, let's say, the bird. So in this case, the grasshopper is the primary consumer, and the mantis is the secondary consumer, and the bird is the tertiary consumer. Okay, in this case, grasshopper is the primary consumer because they feed directly on the plants. Mantis is the secondary consumer because they feed on the plant eaters, which is the grasshopper. And finally, bird is the tertiary consumer because they feed on the secondary consumers, which is the mantis. Okay. So, okay, food relationship between living things. Different population of organisms are linked together by the food that they eat, and this food relationship can be represented by a food chain. So, over here in this diagram, you can see that the plants is eaten up by the donkey. So, a typical food chain actually shows you how one organism depends on another organism for food. So it occurs when plants are eaten up by the herbivore or omnivore, and in and they are in turn eaten up by a carnivore or omnivore. So in this case, the plant is eaten up by the herbivore, which is later eaten up by a carnivore. Okay. Just now, as we mentioned earlier on, okay, this simple food chain actually illustrate how some animals depend on plant directly or indirectly for food. For the cow, as they are plant eaters, they mainly feed on grass. So this plant that's eaten out by the cow, we can say that there is a direct relationship between the cow and the plant. So we can say that cow depends on plant directly for food. But when the tiger eats the cow, some of the energy, okay, stored in the plant is indirectly passed on to the tiger. So we say that the tiger depends on the plant indirectly for food. Okay, we take a look at the typical food chain that can be found in the field community. So we start off with the grass, then eaten up by the grasshopper, followed by the mantis, and finally the bird. Another food chain that you can find in the leaf litter community. Okay, this one is a food chain that you can find in the typical leaf litter community. Okay, so the rotting leaf, which can mainly be found on the floor of the jungle, then they are eaten up by the earthworm, which will break them down into smaller pieces, and finally the earthworm is eaten up by the centipede. So can you write a food chain involving termites and scorpions in the rotting log community? So the next slide will show you the food chain, okay, in a typical rotting log community. So you can see that the rotting log is eaten out by the termite, and the termite is eaten out by the scorpion. So a food chain always begin with a food producer, which is the plant, and ends with an animal. Along the food chain, energy is transferred from one organism to another organism. So we can also say that a food chain is also known as an energy chain. This energy chain actually shows how light energy from the sun is captured by the plants and transferred from one organism to another. Okay, we know that we learn, okay, that from this very simple flowchart, we can see that light energy from the sun is captured by the plants, which actually use the light energy to photosynthesize. So the food made by the plants is eaten up. When the plants is eaten up by the herbivore, energy stored in the plants is transferred to the herbivore. And finally, when the carnivore feeds on the herbivore, energy stored in the herbivore is transferred to the carnivore. Okay, a food web actually is made out of interconnected food chains. As most of the organism feeds on more than one kind of food. So a food web shows the interrelationship of two or more food chains. So a very simple food web consists of at least two food chains. So in this case, you can see that this one is a food web. It shows the plant eaten up by the grasshopper and the grasshopper eaten up by the birds. But these grasshopper can also be in turn eaten up by the voles and eaten up by the weasel. So you can see the first food chain is from vegetation, insect, small bird to weasel. Then the second food chain is vegetation, voles to weasel. And finally, the last one is from vegetation, insect, moles, and weasel. So altogether, there are 3 food chains in this food web. This is a slightly more complicated food web. Okay. Can you write down at least 4 food chains from the above food web? Okay. So based on the above food web, okay, we'll take a look. So we can, as a food chain normally starts with a starts with a food producer. The only food producer here, how do you actually determine which one is a food producer? Generally, a food producer, the arrowhead is pointing away from it. So we first identify the food producer, which over here will consist of the leaf and the grass. So we'll start with the food chain starts with the food producer. So let's say, for example, we'll use the leaf as an example. So we start off with the leaf, then it is eaten up by the snail, and finally eaten up by the bird. So this one is one food chain. Now we use the grass as example. So grass is eaten up by the grasshopper, and is in turn eaten up by the toad. So this one is a second food chain. Then the next one that can we use is grass, eaten up by the rabbit, and eaten up by the eaten up by the python. And finally, we can use grass, grasshopper, mantis, and finally bird. Okay. Of course, in this food web, there are more than 4 food chains. So a population or community depends on several factors: the availability of the food, the presence of predators. So the food relationship among the organisms helps to control the population of the organisms living in a typical community. It also helps to balance the population in the community. So this typical diagram shows you a food pyramid. At the base of the food pyramid is made out of the food producer, which is the plants. Then the mid section of this food pyramid is made out of the plant eaters. And finally, at the top of the food pyramid is made out of the animal eaters. As you can see, the width of each section represents the population size. So we can see that the population size of the plant is greater than the population size of the plant eater, and the population of the plant eater is greater than the population of the animal eater. But however, the balance of a community can be upset by different factors, like mainly by human activities like deforestation. Okay, because by cutting down the forest, they actually destroy the habitats of many animals, which can cause populations of several animals to decrease. Then pollution of the land and water can also lead to a decline in the population of uh, several organisms, okay, like the fish. Excessive hunting, okay, for their like in the case of hunting for the tusks of the elephants and the horn of the rhinoceros can cause their population to decrease as well. Okay, it can also be caused by natural disasters like the drought and the flood. Okay, forest fire is also one of them. Then the last one is the balance of community can be upset by the disease. Virus and bacteria is one of the main reasons that can cause that can actually wipe out a certain population of organism if they are not being controlled. Okay, that's all for food chain and food web. Thanks for your attention.